Good afternoon. The next item of business is portfolio questions on the portfolio of environment, climate change and land reform. Can I remind members who wish to ask a supplementary question to press the request to speak button or indicate by putting an R in the chat function during the relevant question. And can we start with the first question, which is Alistair Allen.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how inshore marine protected areas are managed.
I just want to start by saying that last week we designated the West of Scotland MPA, which means that over 30% of Scotland's seas are now protected, and that exceeds the proposed new international targets. Now, when it comes to the management of MPAs, public authorities must not grant authorisation for activities where there's significant risk of hindering the conservation objectives of an MPA. Therefore, most activities are managed by regulatory authorities on an individual level, referring to Nature Scots advice. Unlike other sectors, fishing is managed through the implementation of management measures at a sector level, using advice from Nature Scot on the risk to protected features from fishing activity.
Reply. The Minister will be aware of the importance of scallops and prawn fishing to my constituency, with companies such as Callan Shellfish employing 30 people locally and bringing vital jobs to areas where there are few private sector employers. What discussions has the Scottish Government had regarding fisheries management measures for the Sound of Barra SAC, and will any proposals be subject to an islands impact assessment?
Minister Mary Goujon.
I would just say to Alistair Allen that I am, of course, acutely aware of the importance of fisheries to the Western Isles, including Callan Shellfish, and the development of potential fisheries management measures for the Sound of Barra SAC was at a pre-consultation stage when it was delayed because of the current pandemic. Now, prior to that pause, stakeholder engagement had been underway, and that had included meetings in Benbecula and in Stornoway, and those meetings took place in March earlier this year. And when we're able to restart, there will be further opportunity for stakeholder engagement, and there will, of course, be wider public consultation too before any measures are adopted. And when it comes to an islands impact assessment, I can absolutely provide assurance that if any management proposal is anticipated to have an impact on islands communities that would be significantly different to the effect on other communities, then an islands communities impact assessment would be undertaken in that case.
Supplementary question, Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Thank you. Given that marine conservation and fishing issues are missing from the Scottish Government's Economic Recovery Implementation Plan, can the Minister please say what action will be taken to deliver a blue recovery to enhance marine health and support inshore fishers to meet sustainability requirements while also being successful and also supporting local coastal communities? Thank you.
Minister Mary Goujon.
I would respond to Claudia Beamish by saying that there are a variety of projects underway at the moment. As I said in my initial response to Alistair Allen, we designated one of the largest MPAs, I think it's the largest MPA in the North East Atlantic, just last week, which now brings our coverage to over 30% of our seas being protected. So we are undertaking a continuous amount of work when it comes to the sites that are designated. Now, as I previously alluded to in my other response as well, there are some measures that understandably had to be put on hold, and some work that had to be put on hold because of what we were having to deal with in terms of the pandemic. But I can assure the member and other members across the chamber that this is vitally important work, and we will be continuing this and continuing to improve the protection for our marine environment as soon as we are able to do that.
Supplementary question, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The South Arran Marine Protected Area has been a tremendous boon to the marine environment to south of my constituency. However, it cannot have the same restorative impact as a no-take zone where the marine environment can fully regenerate. Will the Minister therefore look at the resounding success of the Lamlash Bay no-take zone over the last 12 years and others across the world with a view to creating more in Scotland's threatened marine environments?
Mary Goujon.
I absolutely. I would say that we're continually looking at national and international good practice because that, of course, helps to inform our developing policies when it comes to protecting and enhancing our marine environment. I would say that sites within the MPA network obviously have a range of different measures in place, and these are being monitored for environmental and economic effects to help provide an evidence base for any future actions that we might look to take in our protected areas. And the monitoring outcomes, including Lamlish Bay and experience from elsewhere in the world, will inform how our own MPA network evolves in the future, and especially after new international targets are set in 2021.
Question number 2, Shona Robinson.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what support it's providing to Dundee to assist in the implementation of the city's climate action plan.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
I welcome Dundee's climate action plan, which places climate change at the heart of the city's regeneration. The plan has ambitious targets, a city-wide partnership approach, strong links to national policy, and supports key low-carbon technologies and climate resilience. The Scottish Government and its agencies are working with partners in Dundee. In particular, we've committed up to £150 million over 10 years to the wider Tay Cities Region deal, which includes the ambition to create a step change to a low-carbon regional economy and establish the Tay Cities Region as a leader for eco-innovation. We've also to date provided over £6 million of funding to Dundee City Council to decarbonise their vehicle fleet, co-funded the developments of the low-carbon district energy hub at Caird Park Regional Performance Centre for sport, and provided support to community circular economy initiatives in Dundee.
Shona Robinson.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer? The Cabinet Secretary may be aware of Dundee's new Embark Dundee e-bike sharing scheme, which is set to launch this weekend, making Dundee the largest e-bike provider in the country. Can the Cabinet Secretary say what plans the Government has to further encourage active travel in city centres, and in particular to improve air quality in known city centre hotspots?
Rosanna Cunningham.
Budget for 2020-2021 increased to £100.5 million to support building of large-scale active travel infrastructure and behavioural change. We've invested nearly £39 million in temporary infrastructure to help local authorities support physical distancing and encourage walking, wheeling and cycling during the COVID-19 outbreak. We remain absolutely committed to tackling air pollution. The Scottish Government awarded over £500,000 in 2019-2020 to Dundee to develop a low-emission zone and related public transport measures. And can I welcome the announcement that I read today about the new Edinburgh-Dundee electric bus service, which will be starting next week.
Question number 3, Rona Mackay.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government when it last discussed with SEPA how to tackle the reportedly increasing problem of flooding in Scotland's communities.
Minister Marie Gouchon.
The Scottish Government engages extensively with SEPA and other relevant agencies on a wide range of issues to ensure that Scotland is resilient and able to adapt to the challenges of flooding and other pressures that are driven by climate change.
Thank you very much. Rona Mackay.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you for that answer. Houses in Lennoxtown in my constituency have been hit by severe flooding 3 times already this year. It's clear that this is a problem that will continue to recur given the changing climate. Can the Minister confirm if local authorities are being supported to offer long-term solutions to high flood risk areas that are identified to them?
Marie Gouchon.
I can completely understand the member's concerns about this and in fact the increasing events because of climate change, and I'm aware of the communities at risk of flooding, and including those in Lennoxtown on the 4th of August. The Scottish Government provides substantial support in that regard, including £42 million each year to local authorities for flood protection measures. And in addition to that, in our programme for government this year, we committed an additional £150 million over the next 5 years. That's over and above the £42 million to support flood protection measures. And we also provide around £200,000 annually to the Scottish Flood Forum, and that provides supports to communities that are affected by flooding. But I would also want to add, in addition to those extra funds that we're committing and to help inform the future work that we have to undertake, we are currently undertaking a review to consider the current and future challenges that we face to try and scope out what opportunities and solutions there are for efficient and effective surface water management.
Supplementary question from Mary Fee.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Minister what the Scottish Government is doing to improve the maintenance standards for sustainable urban drainage systems, which is vital in ensuring their longevity?
Minister.
Again, this is another matter that I can understand the member's concern regarding that, but that's where, as I outlined in my previous response to Rona Mackay, again, we are looking at a review to look at the current challenges we face, because this is a problem that will intensify and only get worse as we see the full effects of climate change. So this is something we're taking a serious look at to see what solutions we can develop for the future.
And a supplementary question from Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Minister will be aware of the recent flooding event in Cardenden in my constituency, and whilst Fife Council had already in fact been preparing an area flood study, the final version of this study will curiously omit any reference at all to this very significant recent flooding event. Can the Minister advise, therefore, if there is any guidance on the matter for what on earth would be the efficacy of this new flood study if there was no reference at all to this very significant recent flooding incident which took place in August of this year?
Minister Mary Goujon.
I'd certainly be happy to look at that in more detail, because one thing I would say is that SEPA's Scottish Flood Forecasting Service, that's something that the Scottish Government supports, and they receive a grant of £586,000 towards that, and that uses the hydrological data from 250 monitoring stations plus the meteorological data from the Met Office, and that's to provide accurate predictions, or as accurate as possible, of the likelihood and timing of flood events, and that is of course subject to continuous updates and improvements. But in relation to the specific point that Annabel Ewing raises, again, I'd be happy to look further into that and respond to her more fully.
Question 4 is not lodged. Question 5, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is encouraging people to engage in recycling and other activities to protect Scotland's environment. Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
We want to ensure that the right choices are the easy choices for both businesses and households when it comes to recycling. Our recent programme for government committed a £70 million recycling fund to improve local authority collection infrastructure, as well as a review of the Household Recycling Charter and Code of Practice. The National Managing Our Waste campaign provides guidance for households on how to manage waste, recycle and access local waste services during the COVID-19 pandemic. It also encourages the use of reusable face coverings and appropriate disposal of single-use face coverings and gloves.
Maureen Watt.
I thank the Minister for that answer, especially what you said about face coverings, which are becoming a real problem. And I was delighted to note that last week was Recycle Week 2020. Can I ask what dialogue the Scottish Government is having with local authorities and other stakeholders to ensure we continue to promote such activities as we navigate through lockdown? Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we do, of course, continue to engage regularly with a wide range of stakeholders throughout the waste sector, and that includes key partners, including Zero Waste Scotland, SEPA, COSLA, local authorities and commercial bodies through the Waste and Resources Sector Forum. I'm grateful to those who've worked very hard to keep waste and recycling services going in communities right across Scotland, particularly over this last year. Developed with our partners, the National Managing Our Waste campaign, which we launched in late April, will continue to provide guidance for households on how to manage waste, recycle and access local waste services during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Supplementary question, Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell the Chamber how many tonnes of waste are shipped out of Scotland every minute?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the answer to that, as Maurice Golden is very likely going to be aware, is no. I do not have a minute-by-minute assessment of the waste that's exported from Scotland any more than anybody else will have a minute-by-minute assessment of any other export from Scotland. What I can tell him is that we are making a great deal of progress in terms of recycling. We're doing an enormous amount of work. We've got plans to go a lot further, as he also knows, and I've already outlined the PFG commitment in terms of the recycling fund, the £70 million committed to that. We've got long-term initiatives to tackle the throwaway culture, to actually reduce the global amount of waste that is created wherever it's going to end up. I hope that he will continue to support those initiatives in the future.
And supplementary question from Mark Ruskell.
It's clear that the public strongly back waste recycling, but they don't back waste incineration. And Zero Waste Scotland in the Environment Committee last week warned of a future based on incineration, as they put it. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what is the government doing to actually restrict the burning of rubbish in Scotland? Cabinet Secretary.
Well, again, I need to say that we're making very strong progress, as I indicated to Maurice Golden, the carbon impact of our waste has dropped 11% in 2018 on the previous year. The PFG commitment has already been mentioned. Waste incineration is strictly regulated in line with EU standards, and under the regulations, SEPA operate a very rigorous permitting system for energy from waste operators. We're preparing for the ban on landfilling biodegradable municipal waste by 2025, in line with the recommendations from the CCC, but we will still need capacity to dispose of residual waste while we make the transition to the circular economy in Scotland, and that is the reason for the increase in energy from waste capacity.
Question number 6, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to resolve the reported serious environmental issues arising from a lack of ongoing maintenance at Turbolton Moss landfill.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
Turbolton Landfill Limited, the operator of the site, remains in liquidation. The Scottish Government are not directly responsible for the site, but we are working with SEPA and South Ayrshire Council to assess future options, and on 2nd of July considered the recommendations of a recent site survey on the practical options for the management of the site. The Scottish Government is currently in the process of developing a proposition for how the different public authorities can work together to move matters forward.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. And as she knows, we've spoken about this issue many times and very little has changed on the site, apart from the fact that the giant hogweed now pervades and is invading downriver. Leachate continues to flow. Cabinet Secretary, we can't allow an environmental health crisis to continue to grow. This is a long-standing problem that I brought to this chamber many times. When will the Scottish Government finally act to make Turbolton Moss landfill finally safe?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think the member, and I do know that the member has raised this on a number of occasions. We have had conversations. I know he feels very strongly about it, and that's extremely understandable. But the legal situation still remains what it is. He talked about giant hogweed, and I understand that much of the work across Scotland to control invasive species has unfortunately been delayed due to COVID-19, and that will include any work on the site. We've previously funded work to remove giant hogweed as part of the site investigation that I previously mentioned, and other necessary work will be considered as part of the wider requirements for remediation of the site.
Question number 7, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on when it will publish its response to the Verity Review recommendations on grouse moor management.
Minister Marie Goujon.
As set out in the Scottish Government's programme for government published on the 1st of September this year, a response to the report by the Independent Grouse Moor Management Review Group will be published this autumn.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and I note the recommendation on the licensing of grouse moors, which I hope will be adopted given concerns over the ongoing risk to hen harriers, peregrines and other birds of prey. Can I ask for further detail on the timescale to legislate for any licensing regime should it be decided upon, which I hope can be secured as early as possible?
Mary Gouchon.
Just to say that, I mean, I absolutely share the members' concern about this, and I know that this is something that members across the chamber want to hear more about and are very concerned about. And I would say that, of course, we're very carefully considering the option of licensing, as that was one of the key recommendations of Professor Werrity's report. And if our conclusion is that licensing is to be introduced, as the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary have already stated to the Chamber, we've already indicated that we would be likely to implement that earlier than the suggested 5-year timeframe, as was proposed by the review group.
Supplementary question, Liz Smith.
Thank you. Could I ask the Minister to confirm if the Scottish Government will take into consideration the soon-to-be published Stage 2 research into the socio-economic and biodiversity impacts of grouse moor management and the employment rights of gamekeepers before they respond to the Werrity review?
Minister Mary Gouchon.
I'm sure that the member will be aware. I mean, we had hoped to issue our response to the review earlier this year, but of course, because of the work and the way that we've had to redirect resource because of the pandemic, it hasn't been possible to do that. This has been a long time in coming, and we do aim to, as I've just said in my response to Bob Doris, we want to publish our response to that as soon as we possibly can. And of course, we would take any relevant information into consideration, because obviously the recommendations within the report impacts other agencies too. There's lots of things in there that we have to take into careful consideration. But again, we will be looking to publish our response over the coming months.
Supplementary question, Alison Johnson.
Thank you. The large-scale killing of mountain hares on grouse moors was a key part of the Grouse Moor Management Group terms of reference, and the report recommended action be taken. Now, 94 days ago, Parliament voted in support of my amendment to the Animals and Wildlife Bill to make the mountain hare a protected species. So can the Minister provide an update on how this is being implemented and when it will come into force? Thank you.
Minister.
As the members said, absolutely, that was an amendment that we agreed to as part of the bill. And of course, we're going to set out our timetable for the commencement of the relevant sections of the Act in due course. We have to, of course, give careful consideration as to how any future licensing regime would work in relation to mountain hares, because, as I'm sure members will be aware, the amendment that was agreed had the effect of removing the open season for mountain hares. So that would make it an offence to intentionally or recklessly kill, injure or take them at any time of the year. That would, of course, be subject to certain permitted exceptions, which can be undertaken under licence. So these are the kind of things that we have to consider. And again, we will come back and we will lay out our timetable for the commencement of the relevant part of the Act in due course.
And question 8, Neil Findlay.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to tackle climate change.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
Scotland has the most rigorous framework of domestic climate change legislation in the world. We've already halved our greenhouse gas emissions since 1990, restored 20,000 hectares of degraded peatland, planted 22 million trees and cut waste emissions by 30%. Even as we tackle the impacts of COVID-19, we're ensuring our recovery is a green recovery by investing a groundbreaking £1.6 billion to transform how we heat our homes, £60 million to support decarbonisation of the industrial sector and £100 million for a Green Jobs Fund to build back better. Building on our programme for government commitments, our forthcoming update to the 2018 Climate Change Plan will set out the next steps we will take towards meeting our new and ambitious targets.
Neil Findlay.
Energy is central to addressing climate change, and the development of the onshore wind sector has been a huge missed opportunity for communities. We see ownership of onshore wind farms concentrated in the hands of venture capital firms and foreign-based multinationals whose profits are then repatriated to Germany and Spain and Italy. What is the Scottish Government doing to avoid repeating the mistakes but made during the onshore wind development to ensure that offshore wind development is held by the community so that profits are generated, go back into the local community and the local economy and not to the shareholders of foreign-based multinationals?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, amongst other things, what is being done through the Crown Estate Scotland works very much directly towards what Neil Findlay has raised. We are working very closely with Crown Estate Scotland to ensure that developers will need to commit to the anticipated level and location of supply chain impact on future projects, incorporating these into formal agreements. And this provides developers with a clear and transparent route to demonstrate their progress on the industry's supply chain ambitions. And it will also provide them with the opportunity to show their commitment to companies in Scotland. That's one of the initiatives that we are currently undertaking. We do, of course, continue to call on the UK Government to amend the Contract for Difference auction process, currently solely awarded on price, and we want to see it better reflect value added to the economy and the importance of supply chain sustainability when determining the projects that are awarded contracts.
And a final supplementary from Colin Beattie.
Can the Cabinet Secretary outline what the Scottish Government hopes to achieve as the European co-chair of the Under 2 coalition over the coming year?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very pleased to say that Scotland is now the European co-chair for the Under 2 coalition, alongside a number of other individuals, Governor Newsom of California, Premier Zikalala of KwaZulu-Natal, and Governor Savian of Queretano. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Our term as co-chair has begun, and it's happening in a crucial time for climate action and will help drive momentum towards a green recovery and a net zero future ahead of COP26. And I can advise the Chamber that in our capacity as co-chair, I have already been doing a number of international video events. As European co-chair, Scotland will champion principles of just transition, inclusivity and well-being.
Thank you very much. That concludes portfolio questions, and we will move on in a moment to the next item of business.